Okay, hey Ashton, the first lesson we're going to do, which is actually lesson number 2 based on the numbering system, is going to be the German pronouns. Specifically here we're going to talk about personal pronouns. So I think you probably remember those from taking German 1 last year. So what I want you to do is just go through really quick and write down the ones that you can think of on your own. So in English these would be I, you, he, she, and it. I'm going to go over to the plural side. We, you, of course, is just you plural, but you all to make it easier, and they. And then in German we have one extra one, which I'm not going to write in right this second. So take 1 minute, go through really quick, and see if you can write them all down. Okay, so the pronouns in German are ich, please repeat these as I'm doing them with you out loud, du, er, sie, es, on the plural side, wir, ihr, and sie. And then I said there is one more, and that is another Z, and this one is the capitalized one, and that of course was the formal you. And it is both singular and plural, which is why it's kind of stuck in the middle there. So this side is our singular side, and this side is our plural side. So singular and plural. Let me move that up so you can see that. Okay, so if you were to explain to somebody that has no idea what a personal pronoun is, has never heard that word, what these words are, what would you say to them? All right, so I hope you said something along the lines of personal pronouns are words that replace a noun. So these are things or words that replace a noun. Now this noun can be your subject, this noun can be your direct object, it can be your indirect object, it doesn't matter. And of course it can also be a person or a thing. Now whenever we went through and learned these the first time, there was one thing that was really important, and that is, first of all, these are all third person singular. So whenever we work on conjugating verbs in a little bit, I'm always going to write all of these on the same line, because they get conjugated the same way. But what was really important when talking about these three things is gender of nouns, so grammatical gender. Now anytime that you're doing your vocabulary in German, you of course have the grammatical gender in front of it, so you're either going to have a der or a die or a das. Now these der, die, and das are going to describe the grammatical gender, but they also determine which pronoun you're going to use when you're replacing something in a sentence. So if I have something like das Buch, the book, so this means the book. In English I would just say it to that. That is pretty straightforward. In German I have to look at the grammatical gender. So in this case my grammatical gender is das, which is neuter, and that is even in German going to be s. So when you're looking at the top, something that is das is going to correspond with your s. So I'm going to write that behind there. Add that to your notes. Okay. If, however, I have something like der Tisch, which means the table, in English, I would still say it, right? I wouldn't change that because it's a thing. But in German, because this is going to be der, I will not be using it. I would be using the German he. So I'd use er. So going back to the top, I'm going to write der. Which is the last gender that is left? Which one do I still need? Got it? That is D. So this is how they correspond to grammatical gender of nouns. Now, of course, you can also have nouns that are plural. When you have things that are plural, you got to go over to the plural category. And because you're talking about something that you're not part of, you're going to eliminate both of these top two. So this is your D plural. So if you have a noun that is plural, that's what you would replace it with if you were using a pronoun, and that is also what you would conjugate the verb for if you needed to. So pronouns are words that replace a noun. That can be a thing or a person, and they correspond to gender. So yeah, C, S, D plural is C plural. Okay, so those are your pronouns. The Z formal, or capitalized Z, that is a little bit of an oddball. When we're speaking in German to someone, so this is only used if you're talking to a person, because you're using you. So if you're talking about somebody, this is not something you would ever use. But if you're talking to a person, like let's say a store clerk, or your teacher, or an administrator at the school, you want to be very friendly and polite to them, and you're going to be very formal with them because it's a formal relationship. So because of that, we have this capitalized Z. It can be singular or it can be plural. So if you're talking to a teacher and Mr. Patton, for example, you would use this Z. If you're just talking to Mr. Patton, you would use this Z. So make sure you know singular and plural. And it's usually between adults. If you have just two friends or two guys that you know, or just one guy that you know, you wouldn't use this. The one exception to the rule, or to just the general rule of formal and informal that I'm going to mention, is if you're talking to a family member like your mom. We teach kids here in the US to say yes ma'am, yes sir to their parents. So it would seem like that is something that we would use, but we don't do that. In Germany, we're very informal. If it's somebody that's a member of your family, you're never going to use C formal. That would be super strange. So that is the mini overview of German personal pronouns. Let me know if you have a question in the comment box coming up in a second. Okay, so there is no distinct work that I want you to do with this, but it's really important that you know these. They are in your workbook. You can look them up in there. They're actually listed at the beginning of chapter 1, which is the second little section. If you flip to page, write this down for you, workbook page 17. So that's for reference. But please make sure that you're writing this down in your composition book as well so that you don't fall behind. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go from here straight into verb conjugation, which is our lesson number 4. It's going to be a separate lesson, but it is really linked to this, so you can watch that one next. Verb conjugation, and that's lesson 4. Sorry, lessons are coming out of order.